Hi, I'm Jason Syke, and today I'm going to do a podcast. This podcast is in relation to a video that I released earlier about new US legislation and how it's bad for mental health and is attacked on the marginalized in society, specifically the LGBT community, as well as the trans community. As an adult, I very much enjoy debate. I come from a conservative stock. I myself am more centralist with an emphasis on human rights and freedoms. I am fortunate that I can debate ideas with my family to get to the core of what their beliefs are, though we may disagree on topics. We often find that there is common ground and we can debate ideas without being attacked personally. However, as an adult who is self sufficient, I've made it clear that if my family were to attack me personally, try to control me, criticize me for a life that has brought me happiness, I will cut them off and not think twice about it. I do not have time for entertaining a venomous relationship, and as an adult, I can make those decisions. I'm not discrediting my family. I do love them very much, and they are a part of my life and do bring a lot of happiness to my life. My personal view on parents and family can get a lot of parents upset, but the reality is that this is a factual, matter of fact situation. For children, you don't owe anything to your parents for fulfilling their duty of keeping you alive. That was their duty, their responsibility. If they didn't do that duty, they'd, of course, be in jail. So that part of that, you are not in debt to your parents for, having life that they chose to bring you into. And with that, if it's a toxic relationship that you have with your parents or family members, you have every right to leave it behind, find a place where you belong, and focus on your own family. Either that being you have your own new family, a nuclear family where you can raise your own kids or, have a spouse or partner, or you can find people in your life who fill the role of family. Oftentimes, that is called a found family. Essentially, people that you have found that are more family to you than your blood relatives. Now, back to my discussion with my family and reflecting on the ideas and beliefs surrounding, in this specific instance, the trans community drag story time situation. Each topic that I'll bring up is a slice of our conversation. I'm going to start with where we first went to, and that was about the drag story time. And when I was discussing this with my family members, there was questions that I had related to it. I myself did need to kind of explore it a little more, do more research, and really see what was out there. And that goes for many of the different topics that we have. I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I feel that I am trying to do my due diligence to know what I'm talking about. One of the things that I had said was that the individuals that are doing things like drag story time and libraries and like community places, not necessarily all in schools, that seemed to be more of isolated incident or area rather than an umbrella thing for as a whole. And when I had mentioned that and was just talking about these individuals who are doing the drag story time, the presenters, the professionals, were not, dressing scantily or engaging in a sexualized manner. I was met with, well, they are doing these things, and I've, found or have seen proof and, those sorts of things. When I went and researched it myself, even on conservative media, I found no validation for the claim that the individuals were dressed in suggestive manner and so forth. In fact, all the pictures that I found of those specific events, the artists were fully clothed head to toe. Many of them, up to their neck, down to their wrists and floor length. And I, you know, it's difficult to see the things that are actually happening and then, have that discussion with those who are like arguing against those positions or even for those positions, and those are just not lining up with, what is actually happening. And I find that many times it's because of the source of the information that they are retrieving it from. My family or extended family are often fond of a opinion-based network rather than one that's, based in actual fact and an accredited source. That particular network is currently in the middle of lawsuits and scandal for purposely misrepresenting their positions and lying to their consumer base just so that they can achieve more dollars, which is really sad and terrible for journalism. It's a bad look, and it's unfortunate that that happens. And, I grew up watching that type of media. It's certainly more polarized now, and I put no faith or credit into that, though it is a good source to see what may be going through the minds of people who are on that more like conservative fringe spectrum, where they kind of put logic out the window and are running it based off of feeling and speculation and things that are not totally based in factual data. So that's my personal opinion on certain sources of information that are more harmful than good. Back to another point that we talked about. One thing that was mentioned was that, preventing these things or talking about gender or, having drag story time and those sorts of stuff, was because we are protecting children. My question is what are we protecting them from? My attempt is to kind of like rip away from just a blanket we're protecting the kids to like what are you actually protecting them from. None of the kids are being physically assaulted, emotionally abused, mentally abused, anything like that. So if they're not being harassed or attacked or, physically or mentally harmed in a certifiable way, what are you protecting them from? And when I inquired that, specifics were not able to be provided, which it was more of a like philosophical thing rather than actual harm. And so in my interpretation of it, it was fear of a thing that is non-existent, like damage, rather than recognizing the difference, and that It's not actually harming anybody, but is more of like a discomfort because they don't understand it or it's repulsive to them, something of that nature. My additional thoughts on that are parents inherently incapable of talking to their children in, essentially watered down terms, um, to address those things that the parent may not want in their household? Do the parents feel insecure or doubt their ability to talk to their children, specifically their own children? Children will naturally be exposed to things that parents may disagree with. We live in a society of people, different families, different structures, and those are really unavoidable. And isn't it the duty of the parent to set up that framework in the home to discuss things that are okay to, you know, pursue and those which are not okay to pursue in the home, to define or provide structure for what gender is or what's okay? Um, and so a child, they live at home underneath that household. The parent or guardian has a responsibility to set that framework up. And it is disconcerting to, see these people up in arms and they're saying, well, we can't control, such and such. Well, frankly, you cannot control everything in this world. And if your children are exposed to something that you disagree with, you should be prepared to talk to them about that. That's your responsibility as an adult, is to teach your children what your personal beliefs are, what your values are, and then, while they're in your property, they have to follow those things as well, whether or not they do it after they move out or after they become adults. Additionally, the things that children are exposed to, kids go to public school, and whether it's the teachers that are, talking about these things, which it really isn't their duty to talk about those things, that, you know, sex or, the relationships and, encouraging that stuff. That's really not the place of the teacher. But the children go to school with other kids, and those other kids are exposed to things as well. So, really, if you want to keep your kid from being exposed to what's out there in the world and having opinions or forming interpretations and, all that stuff, you might as well teach them in a closet and keep them there until they're 18. The lack of control that parents have for every aspect of their life is a part of being a parent. You can't control everything, and sometimes you just need to be okay with being the cleanup crew and restructuring, what children are going through. Other arguments that were brought up were that the materials were sexually explicit. People are grooming children. The people that I discussed this with didn't say child predator or grooming, I should mention. But when I researched the topic, even on, again, these more conservative places that could provide a source for material, that those things weren't present at all. It was just story time with grown-ups in dress up, nothing sexual, no gyrating, none of that stuff that people are freaking out about aren't present in those situations. Additionally, words like grooming and child predator, those are not synonymous with, trans or gay or the drag community. They are buzzwords, kind of those red flag, red herring type words to categorize a group of people who are different than the, quote unquote normal, or, like that 80% of people. And, when you use these words in not appropriate or applicable situations, then you really like detract from the seriousness of those words. Additional to that, the characterization of gay people, LGBT people are child predators and groomers really discredits the reality of the situation. Um, and quite frankly, when it comes to groomers and child predators and, those sorts of things, statistically, the LGBT plus community is microscopic in comparison to the straight world at large of both men and women who, sex traffic and groom children for abuse. You see it all the time in the news. Overwhelmingly, it is, straight men, rather than these people that are the marginalized groups that are being so focused on. It's the bigger picture that people are starting to ignore or attempting to ignore. Furthermore, another term or definition, this one was used in our discussion, was sexualizing children. What does that even mean? Well, I'll tell you. So, to sexualize something means to see it or like view it, someone or something in a sexual manner, and treat it in a sexual manner. Additionally, it is something that is, sexually exciting, something that is arousing. And the issue with the term for sexualizing children and applying it to, these artists and people who are just being people, is that you are mislabeling them and misusing a word that you don't really understand. And from all the things that I researched, all the articles and testimony pictures and everything that I saw, is specifically children are not being sexualized in any way. They're not being exploited, they're not being, aroused, those things that conservative, often hyper religious individuals are demonizing, the group of others that they want to separate themselves from. But like I said, the people are using terms and phrases and, things like that to put false red flags where they don't like something, to demonize it and make it worse than it really is, which is not, anyway harmful in the manner that they're being described. I also wanted to throw out there a little helpful, scenario. If a parent has a kid, they come across a drag performer or someone in dress up, very simple terms that you can explain to a child is, and, also emphasizing your belief system, is, some people dress up for, like for work or, whatever. But that's not something that we do in our house, something like that. It's very simple, very easy to do, and a child can understand what you're saying. You don't have to freak out about it. Additionally, just because something exists that you may not necessarily agree with, which does no actual harm. There's nothing that is categorically harmful about it. That does not give people the right to strip those choices, those decisions away from other individuals. Just because you wouldn't choose it does not mean that you should be given the power to remove the options and choices for other people. This also goes into a personal argument that I have, which is you should worry about your own children and not the children of other families. The reason being, especially for things that are inconsequential. The reason being is that every family governs their family unit differently than your own. And that is okay, and that's a beautiful thing, and that is something that is a benefit to society. Um, but again, stripping the rights from other families to have choices, because that is not a choice that your family or that you would make for your family, is a violation of human right, of autonomy, of the rights to pursue happiness and do what you feel is best for your family. Again, especially when those situations are inconsequential to actual damage that is being done. The argument, I guess, that would be, back from that is that it's harming them spiritually. But as a parent, if you are going to be raising your children in a spiritual manner, it's also your job to build that up, to reassure, to strengthen that spiritual aspect, regardless of what happens in the world or what's going on in the world, because you can't control that. You can only try and control the environment that is in your home. And again, just because there are options does not mean that you have to participate in those options, but it does mean that you don't have the right of taking those choices away from other people. Another topic that we talked about that kind of goes throughout this thread is the topic of indoctrination, which was brought up in our conversation. I pointed out that teaching children your own belief system in your household is in fact indoctrination. The comment or feedback that I got back from that was that it's about teaching values. My counter argument to that is the question of, do you think that people who don't have a deity in their life, don't have organized religion, that sort of a thing, do you think that they are incapable of having standards, of values, of ways of raising their children, of living and doing no harm to others? Because if that is the way that someone thinks, or the way that you think, where, these are godless heathens type of thought, that really discredits the ability for people to govern themselves. We already have laws and things in place that are mutually agreed upon as being either egregious or permissive. And to just discredit the parents and the families of providing a good and healthy environment because they don't follow a particular religion or have a religious structure does no one good. And it really shows the lack of confidence in other people to teach good things. And you would find many people who don't have religion and deity, who also have very similar practices as those that do have those structures in terms of personal values, sans the religious practice. So instead of, perpetuating ignorance, realize that people are as intelligent as you are. Maybe more so, maybe less so. But people do have those choices, and most people would like to live in harmony than causing discord and, riling up and conflict. I think that one of the fears that parents may feel is that their children may, get away from them or become something else, or essentially become something that they did not plan for their child to be. And, that's definitely a control thing. When children become adults, you gotta let them make their own decisions and, still love them even though they're not making the decisions that you have made. um, that's how my parents are. They love us. They, um, may have different opinions about how we are living our lives or structuring ourselves. But at the end of the day, they are welcoming and loving, even though my siblings and myself are, um, in different places and in our experience. Um, but in addition to that, just a comment in, thoughts that I had is that if your child were to grow up and end up resenting you for the iron fist raising that you did and tried to maintain, or still try to maintain as they are adults, is that not your fault as a parent for not forming that truly loving, accepting environment, regardless of the people that your children end up being? I'm not advocating, serious issues like drug abuse, um, harm, those sorts of things. But I am advocating for those who just have a difference of opinion or a difference of lifestyle. Um, there should be no reason that a parent will reject their children because of them using their autonomy and not causing harm to anybody else. And finally, moving on to one of my last points here is we had a discussion with concerning trans and, like homosexuality, that sort of stuff. And I brought up where you can't force people to do those things. Even if they know about them, you cannot force them to be homosexual, to be trans, to change their gender identity. And like a pushback argument that I got was, well, yes, you can. Look at Thailand. Look at, all those people dressing differently, or like cross dressing, or being trans, or what have you. And the statistics on people who are truly trans are the equivalent of the same statistical amount as in the US. So people aren't more homosexual, more trans. There is a strikingly different socioeconomic issue that we have here. And that is that the families and individuals in Thailand who are part of the sex trade system that goes on there, they are doing it out of necessity. So if a clientele that will provide them an income, from what I was reading, it's around $500 a month is the like average income for a good paying one in these lower class societies. And those who are able to work the sex trade system are going to be bringing in more money than a typical job, which is going to pay you less. Additionally to that, the culture over there is that you earn money and you take care of your predecessors, and you support your parents and your grandparents, and that's just the cultural idea of the area and practice. And so talking about that, um, men dressing as women or people engaging in homosexual activity to bring money to the table is not a reflection of what their actual gender identities are or what their orientation is. It is a job that they are doing to have an end result, which is income. And so, those things are not synonymous with like you are forcing people to, do such and such. In addition to that, if we are relating that occupation or that trade, if you were to think about people who are in human trafficking, sexual bondage, those sorts of stuff, they're going to also be engaging in, or it being thrust upon them, um, activities and circumstance that is not consistent with their identity. And so where's that argument that says people are being forced to be these things, when in fact they're either elective to do those things, it's brought out of necessity, or it's being thrust upon them, but that's not an internal identity that they are having or that is coming from themselves, but it's being thrust upon them. So instead of focusing on things like fear or miscategorization, or we're not really doing the due diligence that we need to look into these issues, to see what the people are saying, to see what studies are saying. We should stop ourselves and really focus on what am I lacking to fully understand these situations, these people. Doing that will allow your mind to be open to learning about things and having a knowledge of things, rather than, having a speculation or an idea, or a fear of things that you don't understand. And additionally, in that, if you really understand the topic that you're speaking about, then your stance is more secure. Whether you're for or against, not being educated and trying to argue a point when you don't even know what you're talking about, as a very poor ability for argument, and invalidates the truth of what you're saying. An additional argument that I came across, and that just went through my mind as I was doing research, and also seeing the replies and reactions that other creators have done, is the realization of the comparison that people are having. I watched a video of a trans individual, living their best life, and then being attacked by those who are misgendering them, saying that they're a man, and just ripping them down for trying to live authentic to themselves. And the idea that I had was that the truth that these people who have a varying identity other than the gender binary. They're living a truth that is true for them. Conversely, you can relate that to, say, a religious person's belief in their religion. For them, it is true. It's, that straight arrow type of situation, and they know it's true. Well, that is also equivalent to what the trans individuals or gender varying individuals experience about themselves. For them, it is the truth. It is the core of their belief. It is true, authentic, self actualizing situation where they are becoming more holistic and becoming true to that core belief system that they have. When you compare that to a very devout religious person's belief, you can parallel that with their strong beliefs that what they are living, what they are believing, is the truth and like the all-encompassing truth. And to say that another individual who has that truth belief, that they are living a lie, that they're not, living in the reality, that's not what's going on, and you mischaracterize those individuals. Well, for those who may not be religious, to the religious person, that religious person may be living the biggest lie that's ever been told. So the truth is that truth is subjective. It is individual, regardless of what you think on it. It is a individual experience, and it's not something that you can prove to other people. You can't prove your religion, that it's the true religion. You don't have God in front of you to prove that what you believe or what you say is truth. You can just hope and believe that they are true, but you do so with lacking evidence that those things are factual. Now, you may have materials that are a representation and, record of the beliefs that you have, that have been, been materialized over time. Well, so too does a person who is living authentic to their gender variant identity. And that is that they are taking the material experience, their own body, the formation of beliefs, what they is going on in their mind, and they are making that true from themselves. Now, you may not be able to say that they are male or female or however, because of such and such reason. Well, alternatively, when it comes to those very strong beliefs of religion, you also don't have the ability to show the truth or validate or make valid those things which you profess. And so what it is that you are both trying to live a life of truth that you see for yourself. Though they may be different situations, they're very related in the structure of what that means. So to kind of sum up the podcast for today, it is that we should do our due diligence to understand the materials that we have these very strong opinions about, especially when it involves human life and human freedoms and expression and, the raising of children. Additionally, know the words that you are using to describe something, especially if those words are dangerous and highly potent and are subject to things that are not related to the topic at hand. So do your due diligence, know what your vocabulary is, and apply it into the correct situations, which many of the red flag words, like I mentioned previously, are not being applied correctly, and they're being applied to the wrong group of people that is actually designated for. It is the responsibility of parents and guardians of children to make the world make sense to their children. And that is an ability that every person has to explain things in simple terms so that a child can understand them. You don't have to go into great detail, you don't have to be graphic. There's no reason to be. Oftentimes, the situation or thing is not of a graphic nature, it's just of a observational nature. And so it's the responsibility of those parties who are over children to be able to help navigate life, navigate new things, navigate the unknown, and to not fear the ability and the responsibility that a person with that authority has to help guide those kids. Additionally, like said previously, it is also the responsibility of that adult figure to set up the framework for the home and to, exclaim things are acceptable or unacceptable, with the recognition that as soon as that child becomes a adult and is able to make those decisions for themselves, that the grip that you have in trying to guide them into a specific category or pathway of life that you had over them is no longer applicable, and to open your heart and mind to the fact that people may make decisions that you don't agree with, but they are still decisions that they own. Just as you had made a decision to live the current path or future path of life that you have right now, so too it's true that those other people can make decisions for themselves, regardless of if they are the same or different than the ones that you had made. And then, kind of, my last point, just to tie it up, is that if you're going to be credible on a topic, do the research and get it from sources that are not inflammatory sources, ones that are based in opinion rather than fact, ones that are based in emotion rather than a framework built on truth. It is a difficult thing, especially for those who have not had the training or gone to school to really know how to look things up and to vet them as valid sources. But it's a practice that takes practice, and I encourage everyone to, especially if it is such a hot topic issue and such an emotional issue, to really become well-rounded in that topic and to research both sides. You don't have to be an expert in it, but you should, be well-rounded so that if you have an opinion that you want to defend, that, you're not just coming up with that opinion because of a reaction to fear or speculation or, the unknown. You actually understand the topic of conversation and can relay that in a cohesive, concise, and acceptable manner. I appreciate you following along and listening to today's podcast. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to attach those to where this is posted, and I'll reply to the ones that are posted. Feel free to give me suggestions of different topics to talk about. This channel is for you, and to cover things that you may want to know more about. Maybe reflecting on past videos or past podcasts, to really create a environment for learning, which is kind of the main goal, as well as being aware of psychological process, how it is fit into society, how we operate as individuals. Go ahead and hit subscribe and the notification button so you know when my next content comes out, and I will see you next time.